Hey guys, welcome back to the Pizza Story podcast. Today on the show, we have an absolute legend. He spent 30 years in corporate IT before following his passion at 56 years old to open up what became a Brooklyn institution. Please welcome the ultimate pizza godfather himself, Paulie Gee.
Thanks very much for having me, and let's keep away from the Godfather references there. So,
Okay, no
great
problem.
guy
Um,
and law-abiding citizen.
okay, a law-abiding citizen, Paulie Gee. Thanks so much for joining. I've been following you and your journey. And I'm so glad that you're on the podcast. And I really can't wait to hear your story.
Good. Well, you don't have to wait, okay? Because I'm here to tell it right now. And the most important part of this is I'm always excited to be on a podcast because this journey I took later in my life, at 56, kind of I don't want to say saved my life, but changed my life. And now I feel like my wife and I are living our best life. And I know that it took some courage to do that. And I want to help other people realize that they could do the same thing. And that's always the most important thing.
Yeah.
So
Listen, I'm on the same page as you because I've worked in corporate marketing for, 20, 25 years. And many years ago, I wanted to change my life and I got back involved in my family's pizzeria. And it really did change everything for me. And now I just want to do pizza.
that's great. It's great. There's nothing better to do. It's simple and it's delicious.
Absolutely. So, Polly, can we start at the beginning of, how you grew up and where you grew up and kind of take us through your life?
Sure. I grew up in a neighborhood in Brooklyn called Kensington. It's kind of in the center of Brooklyn. It was Irish American, Italian American, and Jewish American. And my family, my grandparents on my father's side were from Sicily, and on my mother's side, they were from Eastern Europe, Ashkenazi Jews. Where I lived in Kensington, I tended to gravitate towards the Italian American heritage for whatever reason. I like that, and I'd go to my grandmother's house, who was right down the block from us, and it was always Sunday dinner at 2 p.m. And I just loved Italian food, and for the very longest time, I always had to have my pasta on Sunday. And eventually, when I became an adult and had freedom, it started to be pasta almost every day. So, which not always that good, but I did have a love for it. I still do. I had when I was, I guess, in my late teens, almost 20. I was living with my parents, going to the School of Visual Arts, I think, at the time.
Yeah.
And my father had retired. My father was 47 when I was born. Okay, and my mother was 7 years younger than him, and he retired. He was a printer, worked in the printing industry. And my mother was still working. I needed to work. We lived in a one bedroom apartment at that
Hmm.
time, and I got the bedroom. They always took care of me. When I was younger, my sister and I shared a bedroom. They slept on the couch in the living room in a different
Wow.
apartment. At one point, then we moved into what they call a railroad apartment, and that was like, if you know what they are, they're like one room after the other. To get from one room to the other, you have to go through it. And but at that point, early 70s, Italian Americans, the men barbecue, the women cook. That's pretty much the way it's been. And in my case, my mother, she was Jewish, but she learned to cook really good Italian food. My grandmother, was from Sicily. She was from Agrigento, and I like my mother's Italian cooking more than my grandmother and my aunt. So,
Wow.
and so I learned a little bit from her, not a lot, but my father, who had retired, my mother said, "Look, I'm not going to work all day and come home and cook. So you're going to have to prepare the meals." And that greenlighted me. I remember my father, not shying away from the stove, being willing to do that. And it made me, feel comfortable being a cook and not demanding somebody else cook my food for me. Right. And I started cooking. My parents
Mhm.
would go away. I guess my mother retired at that point. I'm not sure, but they'd go away for a long time, a month at a time. They'd go to Florida, and I would cook, you know, it's usually ravioli with meat sauce. That was my favorite dish. So, but that's how I started actually cooking. Now, in terms of pizza, I always loved a good New York slice. Okay. Right there in that neighborhood of Kensington, there was a little pizzeria. It was half the size of a typical pizzeria. Usually storefronts are 20 feet wide. This was like 10
Yeah.
feet. And
Hmm.
I went there and I had a good old New York slice and I never forgot it. So, and also we lived in a building until I was 6 where our neighbor upstairs, Irish American family, few kids, he would go to, and this is very important in terms of my love for pizza. There was a restaurant nearby called Scarola's,
Hmm.
and they also made pizza to go. It was a full service restaurant. And he would come home on Friday nights. There's something about Irish Americans, and I think other Catholics, they would eat pizza on Friday because, not just during Lent, the way it is now, you don't eat meat on Friday, period. So he would come home and bring his family pizza, and he'd walk right past our apartment, and I'd be walking past or whatever, and I love that smell of a pizza in a cardboard box. And
Hmm.
for whatever reason, again, we didn't have a lot of money. I think that was part of it. I would say, "Can we get pizza? Mom, can we get pizza, Dad?" "No, no, no, we're not gonna do that." So I was, like, denied pizza, and the more I was denied the pizza, the more I wanted it. So, and that's my history. And eventually, when I was old enough I'd go to school,
Hmm.
and we could walk to school, and at lunchtime, they let us out. We was in the 4th grade, 3rd grade, whatever. We could
Hmm.
actually go out at lunchtime, and there was a pizzeria a few blocks away called Triple Nickel. Not a good name for a pizzeria. You know why it was
Yeah.
called Triple Nickel?
Because it was 15 cents.
Right. So what happens
Yeah.
when it goes to 20 cents? They had to change their name. Right, so
Yep.
but in any case, used to go there. I used to get 2 slices and a drink, usually a fruit punch or orange drink for 40
Yeah.
cents. Yeah. So,
Wow.
yeah, and but eventually, there was a pizzeria in our neighborhood that opened up in 1966. I believe it opened St. Joseph's Day, called Corner Pizza with a K. Still there
Hmm.
today. They celebrated. I don't know why they celebrated on May 3rd, I think it was, because in their 50th anniversary, they celebrated it on St. Joseph's Day and the day after. But this year
Wow.
yeah, but that pizzeria is there. And to skip way ahead, when I open up my slice shop, okay, I model my slice shop after that slice shop and others like it. But to fill in the gap between there,
Hmm.
I chose a different career. First, I chose photography, and I went to an art school, which wasn't the best place to go because my work wasn't morose enough for the people at the school there. I was interested in being a commercial photographer, and that wasn't their focus. And yada yada yada.
Yeah.
But eventually, what happened? I don't. Why did I mention school like that? So I don't know. But
Well, you took a little detour on your career.
oh, in terms of my career. So I wound up choosing corporate IT. Long story short, worked for the Port Authority in New York and New Jersey. I started in the mailroom. I worked my way up, and that was the cool thing to be in the early '80s. I got into I thought I was going to be in the photography department there, but that wasn't going to happen. They didn't let anybody in. There were 3 guys there, and nobody was going anywhere. Right. So I chose, computer technology, whatever at the time, but I wasn't suited for it. And I went on, I always tried to work my way up the ladder over many years. And after 30 years, I wasn't a geek, right? So I hit the not a geek glass ceiling. Okay. And I knew I had to do something else. And people would tell me because I love to cook. I'd have people at the house. I'd cook, any kind of occasion. I'd be the cook. We wouldn't go out to restaurants to celebrate things. It was just a lot of money, a lot of people. We'd have Christmas parties every year, and people saw that I loved to cook, and they encouraged me to open up a restaurant because they knew I wasn't happy doing what I was doing. Right? But I didn't want any part of that. It just seemed like too much of a grind and too challenging. But I had to do something, and eventually I realized that, pizza was far simpler than running a restaurant, and I kinda thought about doing that. I had become a real pizza enthusiast, and I also knew and this was very important, this really helped me. I'm not telling anybody to go out and become an Amway distributor, but we did that in the '90s, right?
Mhm.
And although it wasn't a success for us, we learned a great deal of positive things from that, that taught us how to be successful in terms of speaking things into existence, believing in yourself, most importantly, owning your own business. When you're working for somebody else, you're working for somebody else's dreams. Okay.
Mhm.
Things like that.
Yeah.
people to be positive. You could do it. Belief was very important. So eventually, a friend of mine came to me. He lived in the same town as us in New Jersey, Warren Township. We moved out of Brooklyn in 1983. I was working for AT&T at that point. I had left the Port Authority, and we were out there. And our neighbor, he had a construction business. He would build houses for people. He would work for corporate offices, plowing their big parking lots and things like that. And he wanted to kind of retire from that. He wanted to create passive income. So he came
Mhm.
to me, and there was this place that was a franchise, mostly in Colorado, called Le Peep. It was a breakfast and lunch place. And they opened one in Edison, New Jersey that he loved. He went there. There was always a line. He noticed that. And he came to me, and he knew that I was looking to do something else, right? Came to
Yeah.
me, and I have to remember to look at the camera and not down. There we go. And proposed that he would build me a restaurant somewhere. He'd build me a Le Peep, and I would run it, and I would own it, and I would pay him 5% of the gross. And I like
Wow.
that. And we started looking to do that, but we didn't. Thank God. God's very good to me in a lot of ways. And one way God was really good to me is he did not allow me to find a space that was appropriate for what we wanted to do. Because if we did, I wouldn't be where I am today. We didn't
Yeah.
find a place. And eventually, about a year into the effort, really, we went all around central Jersey and in the area. I started realizing I have this love for pizza. Which I had grown from New York pizza to more than that by after hearing for years about a place in Coney Island called Titono's. I
Mhm.
finally went there. I thought it was just, well, what could it be? It's like any other pizzeria. But I discovered that it was coal burning and it was just a totally different thing. And it set me and my family on a quest to find great pizza. So in the late 90s, I was a pizza enthusiast. Okay. So, and into the 2000s. And at that point, I had seen that you could build your own brick oven. I knew a guy who opened up a restaurant in Nutley, New Jersey called Queen Margarita. I think it was
Mhm.
originally Gina Margarita. And he built his own oven in there and he was running a very successful restaurant. I thought maybe, and there was a place in Numero 28, still there. There was a guy around it at the time, Salvatore Olivella, and his brother Luigi. Since then, they've worked for many, many people, okay,
Mhm.
in the New York area. But he had built an oven in there, and I thought maybe I could get him to build an oven for me, simply to prove to me. I talked about belief. If you believe in something, you'll fight through any obstacles that you come to. If you believe you can achieve what you want
Yep.
and needed that belief. And so I wanted, not as a hobby, I wanted to build the oven to prove to myself that I could open up a pizzeria. But he wanted too much money to build an oven, and I eventually found free oven plans on fornobravo.com. If anybody's interested, they're still there. Pompeii oven plans, excuse me.
Mhm.
And I went and I bought the bricks, and that was like it. Once I bought the bricks, I was committed. Commitment's a very powerful thing too. I started telling people. Another thing I learned from Amway is you got to speak things into existence. And I started telling people I was going to open up a pizzeria. And that's
Yeah.
scary, but I knew that by doing that, I was helping myself. I learned that much. So I got the bricks and I was going to do it myself. Now, Russ, he was the guy who was going to open up the Peep with me. I told him that I decided I wanted to open up a pizzeria and I thought he would build a pizzeria for me and I'd give him 5% of the gross. And that was it. Right.
Yeah.
Little did I realize that he believed a lot more in Le Peep than he did in me opening up a pizzeria, something I knew nothing about. Right.
Okay.
And he was disappointed, but he did help me build the oven as a real dyed in the wool Italian American. He had a passion for masonry. Like I had a passion for pizza, right? And we built this oven, and I started inviting people to my son. First of all, another thing I learned from Amway is you got to as I said, make people believe you could do something. My son, at 11 years old, told me he wanted to be a pilot, right? And I simply told him at 11 years old, I just said to him, "You could do it." I didn't say, "Oh, it's tough. You got to do this. I said, "You could do it." So later on, now I'm building this oven. He wound up going at first. I was going to send him to a college called Embry-Riddle University. It's in Daytona Beach, Florida. It's an aeronautical university. We went there. I'm a big believer in building people's dreams, right? So I
Yeah.
went there to build his dream. We took him there. I forget what age he was at that time. Maybe he was 12, 13, whatever, 14.
Mhm.
And we went to the gift shop there. They have like the college bookstore or whatever,
Yeah.
and he bought a T-shirt, and the T-shirt changed his life, okay? The reason it changed his life is because the plan was for him to go to Embry-Riddle, right? And the T-shirt said, Embry-Riddle University, 5 and this is a 4-year school, 5 or 6 of the best years of my life, okay? So right away I said, okay, not only would I be having to pay 4 years tuition, sounds like I'd be having to pay 5 or 6. So, and
Yeah.
I knew about, my son was just entered the Boy Scouts. I was never in a Boy Scouts. I wasn't into that at all, but I had friends who were in the Civil Air Patrol when they were younger.
Mhm.
I remembered that, and I said, "No, forget about the Boy Scouts. You should join the Civil Air Patrol if you wanna be a pilot," right? So he did that, and, he also, where were we? You doing it? I don't know what
We're
happened.
talking about your son and how he joined the Civil Air Patrol.
And I also, this is the important part, I knew that if he went to the Air Force Academy, I wouldn't have any tuition to pay.
Yeah.
Everybody pays tuition. And
Mhm.
I told him that he could do that. I said, you should do that." And I helped him all along the way. You know, when
Yeah.
he didn't believe in himself, I helped him believe in himself. And he went, and it was the greatest experience of his life. It totally molded him into the man he is today. But at the
Wow.
time, he was at the Air Force Academy. Okay. And I was building this oven, and he was very excited. One of the reasons I did this also is I knew I had a responsibility to show my children what they were made of and what you have to, how you have to live your life. And I couldn't tell them to go out and become successful if I'm sitting on the couch or just working for somebody else. And, you know,
Yeah.
so I had to do that. And that was very important. That was very motivational to me. And I didn't, I gave somebody that advice recently, and I had one of the most rewarding experiences of my life. Just a couple of weeks ago, we went to Ireland, and we were in Belfast, Ireland. Somebody wrote to me in 2019, maybe, and asked me for some advice. They wanted to open up a pizzeria, and they told me about themselves. He had 2 sons, just like I did. And I told him, one of the things I told him, many things, I lost track of him for a while. Then after the pandemic, he wrote back to me again. But one of the things I told him, I said, we all have seeds of greatness within us. That's another thing I learned from Amway, right? But I also knew what drove me, what motivated me was to teach my sons what they were made of and how to succeed. And I told him, you have that power. You got to utilize that. And he had those
Mhm.
things. And I reached out to him. I had forgotten totally about him, and I said to somebody, are there any good pizzerias to go to in Ireland?" And they mentioned this place, Flower, okay? And I said, "Wow, that sounds so familiar." And I said, "Oh, I talked to these guys," and I reached back out to him. I said, "We're coming to Belfast. We're getting there on this date. Will you be there?" "Yeah, we close at 4 o'clock, but I'll stay open for you," or whatever, yada, yada, yada. And I walked in that place, and he walked out from behind the counter, and he had tears in his eyes because I helped him. And that's, to the fact that I was able to do something and my actions were able to change the world in a little bit in a positive way
Yeah.
was something you just can't buy that.
No.
And
You can't.
but that belief, I told my sons what they had to do in life. And right while I was building this oven, my son was in the Air Force Academy. He had a roommate named Kahoa from Hawaii, and they were coming home for Thanksgiving. And he asked me how I was doing with the oven, and I said, "Well, we've been having a hard time. We got a lot of bad weather. Rush doesn't have a lot of time to help, and and I'm working." And he said, "Dad, you can't tell people you're going to do something." He said, can I say shit on here? By the way, is shit
Yeah.
allowed?" Well,
Yeah, whatever
"Dad, you
swear word
can't
you
be
want.
talking shit and then not doing it. I'm coming home for Thanksgiving. I want pizza out of that oven." And that's another thing that I learned from Amway is deadlines are your friend. Okay. So he gave me that deadline, and he came home in 2 days. Now the thing wasn't fully painted yet or anything, but 2 days before Thanksgiving, we had pizza out of that oven. Okay.
Wow.
And from there, I started doing pizza tastings and started experimenting, practicing, and eventually, I was also, as a pizza enthusiast, there was a website called Slice. I don't know if it's
Yeah.
not the Slice you know of now.
Okay.
It was started by a guy named Adam Kuban. He had 2 websites, Pizza Slice and a Hamburger Today. and each website he wrote about those foods. Eventually, it was bought out by Serious Eats, Ed Levine, and he became the editor of all of that.
Mhm.
But I was a contributor on there. I'd go on there and comment mostly. Sometimes I'd post pictures of my oven. And eventually, my goal was to get him to come to one of my pizza tastings and have my pizza and say nice things about it. Okay.
Yeah.
And that's what I got him to do. He came out with Scott from Scott's Pizza Tours, actually. You know why he came with Scott's from Scott's Pizza Tours? I lived
Yeah.
in Warren, New Jersey, a 40-mile drive from where they lived in Brooklyn. Okay. And Scott had a car. Well, he rented a car or something. He didn't have to drive. And they
Yeah.
came. And it really, that was a very important weekend in my life, too. When Adam came out and he had a great experience. He wrote about it. He wrote an article, which you can't really find today, I don't think. Go, Paulie Gee, Pizza Madman. Okay.
Mhm.
So then from there, I started putting together a business plan, showing it to people. I lived in an affluent town and I was looking to raise money. I had no money at all. All I had was bills. I had credit card debt and I had a big mortgage. A mortgage was like 3 times the size of what what it was when I bought the house. Because all along the way, I wasn't gonna wait, until I had a lot of money to take my kids on nice vacations. My kids could ski their asses off, okay? And that's because I didn't try to teach them when they were 30 years old when I finally had some money, right? I just said, "I have to do this," and we went on wonderful vacations, a lot of ski vacations, and, but at that point, I had no money, and everyone I went to, they say to me, "Well, what about you? You have any skin in the game?" And I had no skin. So eventually I talked with my wife. She knew I wanted to do this. And I said, we got to do something. We have some equity in the house. Let's take out a home equity loan. We'll use some of it and we'll save some of it in reserve. And she said, you know what? If you don't do this now, you're never going to do it. Let's do it. And thank God she said that because
Wow.
there we go. I might have done it anyway. Well, I guess I needed her signature. But one thing is, you could ask her. She's not here right now. I think she's at a podiatrist appointment or something. But you could ask her. I just do what I want. People
Yeah.
joke about, hubby and the boy. You got to check with your boss or whatever. But she's been great. Thank God. She did this while she was still working, and I did this. We needed her to work because eventually I had to, come to Brooklyn to do this. And I couldn't, I at first I thought I was going to work and do this at night. But I figured that all out. But all along the way, she was working a full-time job in New Jersey and helping whenever she could, but it wasn't that much. But then when she retired, she's been a great business partner for me, a great business partner. Okay. You know why she's a great business partner? Because
Tell
she
me.
just does anything that I don't want to do.
That's
We
so
just
nice.
neglect it, and she knows it has to get done, and she does it. She's my, administrative vice president extraordinaire.
Wow. That's
Been great.
incredible.
Yeah.
What was it like opening the first shop?
It was harrowing. It was I looked around for a space, and
Mhm.
I had the same weekend as that pizza tasting with Adam Kuban, I discovered Greenpoint, and that section of Greenpoint where we are today, and Nostradamus had nothing on me that weekend because I stood on the intersection. I don't know if you know Greenpoint at all, where we are, but there's an
Mhm.
intersection, Greenpoint Avenue, which is where our pizza shop is, and Franklin Street, and I saw what that neighborhood was gonna become, and I saw it 16 years before it became that way, and I knew that I wanted to open up there. I found this space. It had almost been a restaurant. It was a restaurant and closed, but there were things that we had to satisfy New York City with that weren't done yet. And one of them was we had to have a bigger water pipe put in to support the sprinklers we had. And I tried to get the landlord to do it, and he fought me. And finally, I just did it. I had advice from the guys who helped me build the shop. I found these two guys in their late 20s, bearded guys. I won't use the H word, but some people might have called them. I'm not going to say it. People get the wrong idea if I say hipster. So I'm not going to say it, right?
Okay.
But in any case, they were building out these places in the neighborhood. They built out this place called the Manhattan Inn, and I went to the Manhattan Inn, and I tracked them down, and I thought maybe I didn't think I could afford them. They did beautiful work, but it turns out they were struggling, and it was the middle of the winter, and I got them to do it for me. I half cash and half equity. I gave them a little bit of equity,
Mhm.
and I built it pretty quickly now that I look back at it, but the biggest struggle was getting people to come because until we put that pipe in the ground and got a certificate of occupancy, I couldn't get a liquor license. All I needed was
Oh,
wine and beer, but I could not get a liquor license. Now it's a little different today. Things are changing a little bit, but back then you really needed that revenue. And for 5 months, we went without it. And, it wasn't just the fact that I'm selling Mexican Cokes for $3 rather than a beer for 7 or whatever. It was people just wouldn't come if they couldn't go in there and have a drink.
yeah.
So, at first, our friends and family night, to go backtrack a little bit, that was harrowing because I hired a guy who really didn't know as much as he did. I don't know what happened, but our friends and family night, he was up all night trying to make the dough right. He had kind of tweaked our dough recipe. And
No.
we walked in the day of friends and family, and the buckets were overflowing. It was a mess. And I called one of the things that I did, very important. I talked to other people who were doing what I wanted to do, and they were all very helpful. They were encouraging, and they were generous with their knowledge. Okay, I went to people like Mark Iacano and Lucale. There was belief. I got belief from him like nobody ever got belief because here's a
Wow.
guy who never made pizza before. He worked in construction making marble counter. He fabricated marble countertops, right?
Mhm.
And he opened up his pizzeria at 2006 maybe, and within a couple of weeks, maybe less, he was the most popular pizzeria in New York. And
Wow.
this is a guy that never did. So he gave me the belief that I didn't need to go to culinary school. I didn't need to work in restaurants. I remember people telling me, "Oh, you should go get a job in the slice shop and work there." I didn't want to do that.
Yeah.
I got cut to the chase. I'm 56 years old. I'm cutting to the chase, right? So I got belief from him. I talked with him. I talked with a guy named Michael Ayoub who owns Fornino, who opened up right, like at the time was the very best spot in all of Brooklyn, maybe all of New York City. Bedford Avenue, North 7th Street, Williamsburg. He had a great pizzeria called
Mhm.
Fornino. I went to Matthew Palombino, who opened up, he was another one who opened up a Neapolitan pizzeria in Williamsburg called Motorino. And all of these people were very helpful to me. These guys I had decided what kind of oven to buy.
Yeah.
And when I bought it, I said, is there anybody I could talk to about these ovens? So he said, yeah, as a matter of fact, there's somebody in New Jersey, not that far from you in Princeton, New Jersey, who has the same setup. They have the same oven. They have the same dough mixer, and he sent me to them, and I went to them. The name of the place was Nomad Pizza. Their names
Mhm.
were Tom and Stalin, not just Stalin. Stalin Fidel. His middle name was Fidel. Yeah, I want to
Wow.
meet the parents. I hope they're still around. I want to meet them one day.
Yeah.
So, but they were very helpful. I don't know how. You know, I don't know how. I pushed myself on them. I'd show up and ask them questions. They were very nice. But so I went to all of those people to learn how to do that. And
Mhm.
one other person I went to, there's one place that I absolutely, you're going to have to go more than 30 minutes. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
People are going to like this.
Yeah, it's great.
They've
I
heard. I loved Roberta's. That's what I wanted to be. The thing I loved about Roberta's, it was like, it was attainable. They opened up a place in a dump. Okay. It was a garage of some sort. And they
Mhm.
didn't do very much to it at all. And a matter of fact, the one thing that I always noticed, they had tables, and on the side of the table was a little notch in the thing, and there were 3 screw holes. And I realized that they went and they bought doors and put them on something and made them into tables, right? And they really
Wow.
did. It was like the Little Rascals opened up a pizzeria. That's what I like to say. And I taught one of the owners there. I can't speak for the others, but one of the owners there, name is Chris Parancini, was a gem of a man. And I asked for him for advice. He gave me advice. And the day that we had that friends and family disaster, I called him.
Yeah.
His partner was 8.5 months pregnant. Okay. He
Oh,
sent over his 2 best people. He sent over a guy named Angelo Womack. He was best pizza maker. And another one, Anthony Falco. Okay. And he sent them over to help us. And I'll never forget that. And he came over with his partner and they stood outside to make sure everything was going okay. And it
mm,
was such a great gesture. Never forget that. And so the opening, we got by. We got by for 5 months. The pizza wasn't that great yet, but, when you look back, you see that it wasn't that great, but it got better. People loved us. I built up a reputation through social media. I learned that, I noticed that you'd see an article on an important website like Eater or Grub Street. There's probably a couple others, and you could see that they was it aggregated it. They aggregated it from another place, and I learned to get stuff onto Greenpointers. People like Grub Street and Eaters would pick up things from Greenpointers and then repost that. So I got a lot of press, and that really helped. And then when the liquor license, and I was gonna just be me making the pizza. I just wanted to keep my head above water, pay the bills, and that
Yeah.
was it. But the liquor came, wine and beer only, about 5.5 months in, and everything doubled overnight. I
Wow.
was making pizza, I had 2 other people helping me, but I love to talk to people. They wanted to talk to me. There were things that could only be done by a manager that I couldn't do if I'm back there making pizza, like changing a light bulb. I've had people tell me the light bulb was out in the basement. Okay. So they knew that I needed to be out there. They said, go ahead, go out, go schmooze, go schmooze. My son was my first pizza maker, and there was another guy who started with me pretty much from right from the beginning, Johnny Greenberg.
Mhm.
And they'd encourage me to go out and do that. So I just hired an extra person and went along, and we were successful. Okay. People were waiting in line for tables, right?
Wow.
Especially on a weekend. And I knew I knew I created something. And, the way I raised the money, okay, was
Mhm.
I talked to all these people. They never stepped up to the plate. Once I got skin in the game, I had the home equity loan. They, yes, but my friends and family did. They knew what I wanted to do, and they wanted to be part of it. And I raised it all, everything we needed to open, plus my money,
Mhm.
through $10,000 investments. Couple of
Wow.
5,000s for people who really didn't have more but wanted to be part of it. And, I had to go into my reserve a couple of times for payroll, but, I paid myself back and, so I had all, these investors, and thank God for them. I did it in a way, I learned this from Matthew Palombino, where I was able to raise 75% of the capital and I put in 25%. But after about 2 years, I owned 80% and they owned 20 to this day. And I built other shops off of that. I built the slice shop in Greenpoint off of that. I built
Yeah.
sadly, the shop in New Orleans. That was a dream of mine that turned into a nightmare. And the shop in Philly that my son runs now. Okay.
Wow.
So once that, I realized I had to do something for my investors, right? So I decided to create a franchise company. I would help other people take what I learned, teach them, and let them open up their own. I'm really offering entrepreneurship more than anything. I formed this
Yeah.
company, and I eventually took a while, but I found people who want to open up places in Baltimore and Columbus, Ohio, and Chicago, and Miami. That was another sad, sad story.
Yeah.
The Miami guy's still my friend today, thank God. He's such a good guy. It didn't work out, but he stayed my friend. So, but
Yeah.
the other thing along the way, you probably got more questions to ask, but I feel like I have to tell you this one other thing to kind of connect the dots
Yeah.
is that our pizza, I don't like putting it in a box for delivery. And about 4 years in, I stopped doing, forget delivery. I never did delivery, but takeout. About 4
Yeah.
years in, I stopped doing takeout. The neighborhood was kind of upset and wish they could. Oh, I'm just taking it down to the park. And I knew it was a slippery slope.
Yeah.
Never gave in, but I decided to open up a slice shop around the corner. I read Danny
Nice.
Meyer's book. It took him like 10 years, I think, to finally open his second place, and he opened it within walking distance. I could close by. And that's what I did with the slice shop. That's a longer story than that, you know. I don't want
Wow.
to that, but,
No, that's an incredible story. Now, through this whole journey, what would you say that you love the most about making pizza?
I'm able to serve it to people. I'm able to play music for them through this pizza vehicle. I'm a frustrated DJ. I had my own playlist. I love talking to people. I love making new friends. When I was making, I never made pizza at home until I started doing this thing, but I did cook for people. But, you want to meet new people, you make friends, you invite them to your house. It's very difficult to do. Now I got people lining up to come to my place. I get to meet new people all the time, all walks of life from all over the world. Okay. All ages. I've gotten to be friends. We go out to dinner with some of these people. And now I've made friends, pizza friends all over the world through guys like the Flout guy. Okay.
Hmm.
And beyond that, I'm part of something. I've been awarded 50 top pizza in their artisan pizza chain category. And I've gotten to meet more people all over the world. So I make new friends all the time. I make enemies sometimes. Anytime you fire somebody, even if, as good of a friend they may have been, they're going to be your enemy. And you got to keep
Yeah.
on making more friends to make up for that. Yeah. I don't get into politics. And there are times when people will believe I should be more involved in politics than I was. And those people could, become your frenemy or whatever. But all in all, I'm getting to live my best life through making pizza. I love making pizza. I love, the Neapolitan pizza I did because it was simple, right?
Yeah.
I love coming up with new topping combinations that, are sweet and savory. That was always my guide in doing that. Naming pizzas, having fun names. But I love doing that. And then the slice shop became another passion of mine because when I decided to finally do it, I realized that I could make it look like the shop that I went to 50 years ago. Places like Corner Pizza, places like Luigi's in Park Slope, in South Slope, who Theo, the owner, says to me, "What you got to copy me for?" I said, "I'm paying homage to you." I told him, first of all, and you weren't the only one that had this motif with the wood walls and the orange counters and boots and everything, right? But I realized I could do that, and I had a blast doing that too. And to this day, with the slice shop, it's very different in that it it's stuck in time, and so is my pizza, which is, kind of stress free. I mean, I work on my dough process to make my dough better. Right now I'm working on Sicilians, but
Hmm.
I'm not trying to change all the time to keep up with the times. I'm providing something that people had 50, 60 years ago. And it's like vinyl. You go into my shop, you're going into a 60-year-old shop, right? As much as I
Yeah.
possibly can. The 65-inch TVs on the wall, they don't help that. But other than that, people get it, right? And it's just like vinyl, okay? In that people today love vinyl. I thought it was 10 years ago, I said it was a fad. What do I know? But who loves vinyl? People like me. It reminds them of going into a record store, smoking a joint, going into a record store, picking out a new album, whatever. And then and listening to it. And then other people, young people, they want to know what that experience was like. And
Yeah.
suddenly they're consuming all this vinyl. Well, it's the exact same thing with the pizzeria. And so those are the things that I've gotten out of it. I've gotten to be a good example, not only for my children, but now for my grandchildren as well. We have Benjalina, I call them Benny G and Angelina, and so
Cute.
but we've gotten to go all over the world too. We've gone to Italy a number of times. My wife bitched the bone that we'd never gone to Ireland. That's half our family was from Ireland, and we finally went. And we had a wonderful time. We get to do all of these things, and I get to now worry about paying the bills. Okay, I get to worry about paying the bills for the shops sometimes, but we're living a better life than we would have lived if I was still working for AT&T.
Yeah.
And
Sounds
the
like a
more
great life.
I want, and I want the satisfaction of knowing that I could be an example for other people. I want other people to experience what I experienced. Okay, it's very important.
Yeah. Sounds like you've created a wonderful life.
I absolutely have. So
Amazing. Guys, I want you to go and follow him if you don't follow him already. It's at Paulie G. It's
if she goes,
Gee.
if she goes,
Yep,
just
on Instagram.
cut me
And
off.
also www.paulieg.com. Paulie, I feel like I could talk to you for many hours, but I love the story. I love what you're doing. When I get up to New York, I'm going to stop in. I want to try the pizza and see you and meet you. But thank you so much for being on the podcast.
And the other thing that you could follow, I have an account. You notice I'm not wearing a Paulie Gee's hat right now. I always wear other people's hats.
Okay.
I have a hat collection. I have almost 500 pizza hats now,
Wow.
pizza-related hats, and you can find those hats on Instagram at Paulie Gee's Pizza Project. Okay,
Perfect. I'll follow that and I'll make sure that we promote that for the episode.
sounds good. Thanks for having me on.
Of course. Thank you.
Bye-bye.